Namaste. Welcome to this session. We are going to consider the Chitta Parikarma, the fourth measure which Patanjali mentions. He begins with the sutra Vishokava Jyotishmati. And if you recall in the previous one, we looked into the means which was a kind of set of pravrittis. And we saw there Shabda pravritti, Sparsha pravritti, Rupa pravritti, Rasa pravritti, Gandha pravritti, Sparsha pravritti as supersensory acts, as they have been called. So we saw some set of pravritti. It began with the sutra Vishayavati va pravrittir utpannaha manasaha sthiti nibandhani. So Vishayavati pravritti, that was the topic of the sutra, and Vishayavati pravritti has 5 classes, subsets, namely of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha pravrittis. Now that topic of pravrittis is being continued, and in this sutra the mention is of Vishoka pravritti and Jyotishmati pravritti. So this is what we come to know if you look into commentaries, Vyasa's commentary, and if you look into classical texts. So this Vishokava Jyotishmati means it is Vishoka pravritti and Jyotishmati pravritti. Now this has something to do with our memory. If the earlier one was something to do with our senses, as we consider sensology of yoga, this is something to do with the memory. See, there are certain memories with respect to vibhuti or vibhuti matva. There are certain noble people in the world. They have been there from time without beginning. What we call as sagely people, sagacious people, saintly people, great yogis, great jnanis, great bhaktas. So, in human history, we have these noble personalities from time without beginning until our times, and they will be also hereafter. They are called Vibhuti Mattva. By their association, our lives are touched. And touched means that they are like touch stone effects. That is called Parisa Sparsha. Parisa is a kind of stone that if it touches any metal, that metal becomes gold. So we have some people that because of association with them, because of acquaintance with those people, our life get a sublime touch. And by samparka, that is by contact, by sahavasa, by association, our lives are transformed. And their memories also have a touchstone effect because they will have contributed so much for our life that mere remembrance, mere memory of those noble souls have sublime effect on us. And then we experience most prominent of such effects is of the nature of sorrowlessness. We become sorrowless. Our sorrows are set aside by just memory of those people. Now, this is our experience that we do get a sorrowlessness, a state of sorrowlessness, or we go past sorrow. We forget sorrows. We forget our worldly torments and sorrows. One of the reasons as to why it happens is that by memory of those noble people, our sorrows flee away, they run away, is because all those noble people invariably are personification of sorrowlessness. So that is a unique thing to all these noble souls, that they are in a sorrowlessness. The sorrows don't touch them. They are untouchables to sorrows, and sorrows are untouchable to them. And that is why their memory gives us elated state. And in that elated state, we are in a sorrowlessness. So that's an important thing about all those sagacious people, saintly people, godly people, yogis, jnanis, bhaktas, that they are not afflicted by sorrows. They are not touched by sorrows. That's a common thing about them. There might be somebody might be a jnani, somebody might be a yogi, somebody might be a bhakta, somebody might be a saint. The common factor is that they are not only sorrowlessness, in sorrowlessness in themselves, but they radiate sorrowlessness. Like sun radiates light, they radiate sorrowlessness. And therefore, in their company, in their proximity, we also get that effect. Like if you will be illuminated if you are standing in sun. It's not possible that you will not be illuminated by standing in sun or standing under light. You will be illuminated. Similarly, that is one aspect, that they radiate. Not only that they are in sorrowlessness, but they radiate sorrowlessness. Like sun radiates light, like sun radiates heat, they radiate sorrowlessness. That's the difference between you and me at times becoming sorrowless. We will have moments in our life when we are not in sorrows, we are not touched by sorrows, we are not afflicted by sorrows, and we have a sorrowlessness, but we do not radiate sorrowlessness. So their sorrowlessness is so effulgent that they radiate sorrowlessness, on account of which all those who come in their association or in their company, they also experience sorrowlessness. It is so profound sorrowlessness in them. They are son of sorrowlessness. And sorrowlessness again has a magic. When we are overcome by any kind of sorrow, when we are in sorrowlessness, we certainly conquer all those situations and surroundings in which we are caught. That is called paristhiti. So we definitely have a conquest over the situations and surroundings around us. Otherwise, we are vulnerable to all those surrounding conditions. We are not proof to any condition that uh, is engulfing us, any paristhiti that is engulfing us. But in sorrowlessness, we experience this, that we have partial control over this formidable condition, which otherwise we cannot be overcome, we cannot be untouched by it, cannot be unimpacted by it. But in sorrowlessness, it does happen temporarily, for a while. To a great extent, we are not vulnerable to surroundings, situations, and the conditions which is engulfing us. So, sorrowlessness is not merely sorrowlessness. This has to be understood, that by sorrowlessness, it is a condition that we are not victims to situations and surroundings. Otherwise, we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to all those situations, surroundings around us. But it gives a kind of conquest that you are untouched by them. Like if you have applied anointed oil to your body, all over the body, the water doesn't touch you. So it's such an anointment that the water doesn't touch you. Similarly, sorrowlessness is such a condition. It is not just a condition. It is not just a condition by itself, but it is something that your mind is something like oil applied to body, whereby you become waterproof. So we become paristhiti proof. Otherwise, we are exposed to paristhiti, that is, circumstances, situations, surroundings, the conditions. So that is another thing to be noted about the Vishoka avastha, or sorrowlessness. So Vishoka means Vigata Shoka. Vigata Shoka. Shok having gone. So point is that such noble people, just memory of them anoints our mind with something whereby the sorrows, the agonies, the worries, the anxieties don't touch us. They will be very much around. You will be engulfed by them, but you are not impacted. Even the holy places, Divya Deshas, where perhaps the God has manifested in avatars, or saints have manifested. The saints are of that place. Then those are Divya Deshas. And we feel that kind of condition that we get, that we are proof against any sorrow and any worry, anxiety, etc., which is the cause of any sorrow. So what is sorrow is to be understood. What happens by sorrow is to be understood. The causes of sorrow is to be understood. And in such Divya Deshas, or with company of such people, noble people, or where their vibrations are there, such as we associate Dehu to Tukaram Maharaj, Alandi to Gnaneshwar Maharaj, such places where the noble people have taken birth and have lived and have blessed the people of not only of their times but even today. Even today, after a lapse of hundreds of years or perhaps 1,000 years or even more, still they have that radiation in those places. This is what noble people do. Now, this is not a visible fact, but this is something that is experienceable fact. You will experience, you will not be having any vision of that. So, the holy places such as Dwarka of Sri Krishna, Ayodhya of Sri Rama, and the place of saints, seers, sages, or where there are those shrines, those places have unique vibrations. And those vibrations really give us a blessed state of mind that no sorrow touches us. So, going to those places and then, or remembering those places, or remembering those sages and saints and seers, that too still contribute. Their names or their memories have vibrations. Their memories still have vibrations, and we do experience as to what enormous thing the sorrowlessness is and blessedness is. Uh, so, when in sorrows, if we think of our personal deity, we get to experience the touchstone effect. In case of difficulties and sorrows, when we are engulfed by sorrows, attacked by sorrows, memory of noble saints and sages will certainly have touchstone effect. The mind becomes blessed. The mind becomes quiet, serene, sublime, sedate, transmuted. Or sometimes even the nature. Sometimes the nature is so sublime that in the vicinity of that nature, it elates our mind. It transmutes our mind. The mind becomes proof against these attacks to which we are very vulnerable: pain, sorrow, worry, anxiety, tensions, restlessness. So, if you overcome this, and then if you have visited such a noble shrine or maybe a sublime beauty which we have in the world plethora, just memory, recollection also works. It gives great solace to our mind. Then there are certain means such as uh, a wick of a lamp. If you look at the wick of the lamp, even that sublimates our mind. Yeah, these are very simple measures. So, just by looking at a wick of a lamp, the mind is elated. The mind which is disturbed, turbulent, weird, will immediately get composed. The sighting of moon on a full moon day, the wonderful star-studded sky, watching the star-studded sky at night, it also elates our mind. So, what has been so far explained, you will see that there was even Jyotishmati Pravrutti. So, luminosity also has capability to efface our sorrows from the mind. And this, the Vigata Shoka of saints and sages, or even they have effulgence. We know we know that there is an aura for people who are spiritually evolved. And we are aware of this aura today. So the aura, which is a luminosity, and the sorrowlessness, they have a radiation. And that radiation certainly gives a bath to our mind, chitta, and the mind experiences a blessed state. Say, for example, simple thing like if it is very dark, it radiates fear. And when it is light, illuminated condition, the fear is set aside. Great part of fear is set aside. A baby will have enormous fear if there is darkness all around. And therefore, when the baby starts crying at night, it is one of the reasons could be that it has got awakened, the sleep has ended, but it sees everywhere darkness. And if you put on the light, it immediately stops crying. So the fear factor is there because of lack of light, and luminosity counters that. This is about physical light. There is something which is called as light of consciousness, light of wisdom. Wisdom is always a light. So the luminosity of wisdom also helps us overcome sorrow. So we can have idea of something as physical light and something that is not physical light but some luminosity of our consciousness by way of wisdom. That also counters any sorrow. So this is an introductory information about Vishoka Pravrutti and Jyotishmana Pravrutti. So, Vishoka Pravrutti, we had a greater kind of orientation, and relatively Jyotishmati I just explained you in the form of aura, because all these noble people radiate luminosity. And that's why they take us to light, and that's why spiritual wisdom is called as light. Other knowledge is not called as light, but wisdom, spiritual wisdom is called as light. So here is a mention of Jyotishmati Vishoka Pravrutti. And Patanjali says, by invoking the Jyotishmati Vishoka Pravrutti, the mind, the chitta attains steadiness, prasannata, sthirata, then samahita avastha, and then it will definitely facilitate ekatattva abhyasa. Now don't lose advertence. Whatever we have seen so far, we have seen 3 pravrutti. Now this is the 4th pravrutti. In each of these pravrutti, or each of these chitta parikarma, the mind becomes placid, mind becomes qualified, mind becomes empowered for ekatattva abhyasa, which is mentioned by Patanjali. It becomes fit for ekatattva abhyasa, which is by way of meditativity of the mind, chitta, dhyanavastha of chitta. All these measures are not just to quieten the mind, but they have potentials to qualify one to go for dhyanavastha, meditative practices. And so this advertence should not be lost. Right from Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, Bhavanas to Prachardana, Vidharana, Abhyam va Pranasya measure, or Vishayavati va Pravrutti Utpanna Manasa Sthiti Nibandhani measure. These are the 3 earlier which we have considered. Each one is for qualifying one for ekatattva abhyasaha or samadhi sadhana, dhyana sadhana. It's not just giving a tranquilizer to mind and making the mind tranquil or sublimator to mind and making the mind sublime. But this will qualify, the sublimity of such will be of such magnitude and quality that it will lead you into dhyana sadhana, ekatatvabhyasa, etc. So each of these chitta parikarma must be related to ekatatvabhyasa, its qualification and the empowerment for that. Empowerment for the chitta, qualification for chitta to be going for those practices. Anyway, Vishoka means Vigata Shoka, as I told you. This is a chitta pravrutti. Because what is being spoken of in this sutra and earlier sutra is something which is called technically pravrutti. Vishayavati pravrutti, Shabda pravrutti, Sparsha pravrutti, Rupa pravrutti, Rasa pravrutti, Gandha pravrutti, or they are called also called samvit. Shabda samvit, Sparsha samvit, Rupa samvit, Rasa samvit, Gandha samvit. But basically they are all pravrittis as the terminology given by Patanjali. It began with Vishayavati pravrutti. So this is a kind of chitta pravrutti whereby the mind is qualified, empowered and gravitating towards ekatatvabhyasa, gravitating towards quintessential aspects of yoga and gravitating towards dhyana sadhana, gravitating towards dhyana, gravitating towards samadhi sadhana. That's why they are called chitta pravrutti technically. And one of the important characteristics of such a mind is that it crosses over sorrows. It goes past sorrows. It is Vigata Shoka. You can't be in Shoka and then thinking of Ekatatvabhyasa, Dhyana Sadhana and Samadhi Sadhana or quintessential Yoga Sadhana. So, Vigata Shoka also in Guna Vrutti, it is going across Tamoguna, going across Rajoguna. Tamoguna is enormous potential for you to be in sorrows. And Rajatama gunas, their combinations, which they keep you in sorrows, they bound you in sorrows, they arrest you in sorrows, they do not allow you any relief from sorrow. So it is, understand, it is Tama Vigata Avastha, Raja Vigata Avastha, Rajatama Vigata Avastha is sorrowlessness. You can't be in sorrowlessness and say that still it is a Rajasic state or Rajaguna profound state of Chitta or Tamoguna profound state of Chitta. That will be illogical, that will be improper. So, Vishoka Pravrutti means you go past the gravities of Rajatama gunas. And Jyotishmana Pravrutti means you get into gravity of Sattva guna. So Rajatama gunas mitigated give you a higher state of mind. So also Sattva guna profusion gives you such a state of mind. So Vishoka Pravrutti means, look at the guna analysis here. Rajatama gunas mitigated, Rajatama gunas diminished or perhaps even neutralized. And then Jyotishman means Sattva guna coming in. So by Rajatama gunas going out, we get a blessed state of mind. And then Sattva guna coming in a big way also gives us blessed state of mind. So Jyotishmana Pravrutti, Jyotishmati Pravrutti, which which is such a pravrutti where you see that there is sattva profusion, enormous influx of sattva guna. So with respect to sattva rajatama gunas, we have to understand these two states as to what is the difference in them, although they have a non-difference. In one sense, they have non-difference because they give you samadhi, bhavana, they give you a conducive, qualified and empowered condition for eka tattvabhyasa and dhyana sadhana and samadhi sadhana. But however, we have to understand the difference in the two while we understand the non-difference between the two as well. Some of the commentators have considered these as two separate vrittis, while some of the commentators say that it is a combination. Of course, if you are in sorrowlessness, it is definitely a dawn of wisdom. You can't say no wisdom has dawned, but I am in sorrowlessness, or I am untouched by sorrowlessness, because sorrowlessness is only kept at bay by wisdom. So, some of the commentators have mentioned that it is a combination of the two, which is also right. There is nothing to have a point of rebuke there. While some of the commentators mention that these are two swatantra pravrittis, this is also irrepudiable. You can't be refuting it. You can't be repudiating it. So it is both. It is mention of combination in one perspective, and these are separate in another perspective. So both are true, both are right in one sense. Because sorrowlessness is, if you look at the other side of it, from the other perspective of it, it is Jyotishman Avastha. And if you look at Jyotishman Avastha of the Chitta, then there is sorrowlessness. Like there are two sides to one coin. So it is also, in one sense, there are two sides of the same coin. But the coin has two sides in any case, what we call as head and tail. And that's why we get both kinds of interpretation, that what is being mentioned is combination of two, because one is not without the other. And some say that there are two separate pravrittis, which is also right. When the mind is luminous, shoka doesn't touch you. When the mind is sorrowless, the darkness doesn't touch you. You are, of course, illuminated in your consciousness. So the point is that you get such pravrutti, even you and me can get such a pravrutti of the mind, which is out of blue, by Santa Samagama, by being in association and company with saints and saintly people. You can imagine what happens to us when we have company of saints and saintly people, or even saintly memories, or even this Divya Desha Sevanam. We get this pravrutti. Otherwise, these pravrittis are not even imaginable to our mind, for our mind, in our mind. But in Divya Deshas and with Santa Samagama, that is, with ourselves mingling into atmosphere of Santa, atmosphere of saints, such transformations and transmutations are experienced. So, what is it that we can be doing for this kind of measure? So, if you have a say, or if you have opinion that there is no such person around me, okay, for in your view you have no such person around you, the whole world is wicked, as some of them have this complaint, the world is very wicked, there is absolutely no good in the world, then what? Are you in the desert that will be parched by heat, and you will not get any solace or any soothing touch? No, there is still some way. That is, take a book which is on life of these noble people. So we have something that is called as Shiva Charitra, Sri Rama Charitra, Sri Krishna Leelamrutam, Bhagavad Katha, Rama Katha Shravanam, Rama Katha Smaranam. So there are still we have lots of resources available, and we should not be complaining of those. So even if you are not in a holy place, yet you can have, and if you have not met anyone, such a noble person in your life, yet you can take recourse to the biographical accounts of these noble yogis, noble saints, noble sages, and Deva Mahatmya, Sri Rama Katha, Sri Krishna Katha. So we have life of great bhaktas mentioned in Puranas, such as Prahlada, Narada, Parashara, Pundarika, Vyasa, Ambarisha, Shuka, Shaunaka, Bhishma, Dalbhya, Rukmangada, Vasishta, Vibhishana, Gnaneshwar, Tyagraj, Narsi Mehta, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Tulsidas, Ramdas, and in every region of our country, Bharatavarsha, we have such noble people. There is plethora of these saintly people who have come on this Bharata Bhumi. And then we have also their charitra available. We can be reading their charitra, which will give a touchstone effect to our mind. And then the shoka, at least temporarily, will go away from our mind, and we will be free from that eclipse of shoka or eclipse of sorrow. We are eclipsed by sorrow. Our mind is eclipsed by sorrow. So at least temporarily, we will be free from that. And that will give us a touchstone effect that will charge our batteries. For sometimes we will have these charged batteries with us, and they can be recharged often. Now this shoka bhavam, absence of shoka, is to be also seen as exceptional antashaucham. This is enormous internal purity. This is enormous purity of chitta shuddhi, chitta shaucham, manasa shaucham. So this is enormously shuchirbhuta state, purified state of our mind, psyche, consciousness and very being. So this is another dimension that we have to consider here, that we feel our mind has undergone a bath of purity, piety, sanctity, nobility, all these noble qualities, luminosity, sorrowlessness, and that is enormous antashaucham. And this antashaucha gets mentioned in Vyasa's commentary. He says, where do you get this bath within you? The bath of purity, piety, sanctity. We know the bath of water, bath taken with agency of water. But this water, this bath is an internal bath. So Vyasa tells us about this yoga related aspect which is given to every mankind by our Shastras. He says, by mind confined to heart region. Heart means not coronary heart but emotional heart, which is the indwelling, which is the dwelling place for the indweller, the Atma, Paramatma, Ishvara. That's called Hrudaya Kamalam, the lotus of heart. So the mind coming in the gravity of Hrudaya Kamalam, one's own Hrudaya Kamalam, then there he says what one gets is Buddhi Samvit. When the mind gets that exceptional condition by just Hridaya Kamala Dhyanam, one's own Hridaya Kamala Dhyanam, you don't have to go out. Because if you have this complaint that you don't have noble people around you, it is in your heart, in the lotus of heart, Hridaya Kamalam, which is the endowment of mysticism. Anatomy doesn't give you this, but the mysticism gives you this. So that is called Buddhi Samvit. And you should recall, we saw those 5 Samvits, Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha Samvit, which we are also called Shabda Sparsha Rupa Rasa Gandha Pravrutti, Vishayavati Pravrutti, Vishoka Pravrutti, Jyotishmana Pravrutti. So Samvit and Pravrutti, there either expression by way of Samvit or Pravrutti. Now in the lotus of our heart, what we get is Buddhi Samvit. It is actually objectifying our own pure psyche. The psyche which is not delimited by all those sheets and delimitations by way of class, caste, creed, gender, status, stature, age, etc., etc., conditions, situations, etc., etc. When the heart gives us that, our mind getting confined to our lotus of the heart gives us such experience. And even Patanjali himself, in the 3rd chapter, has mentioned Hridaye Chitta Samvit. So this Samvit, Chitta Samvit, or what is called Buddhi Samvit by Vyasa here, Patanjali has called it Chitta Samvit elsewhere. And that gives a solace. That gives a transcendent state. Then he says this Buddhi Sattvam is Bhaskara. Bhaskara means sun. It is Prakashamaya. It is very luminous. Buddhi Sattva is very luminous aspect. And then for a yogi, it is like endless, spotless space, ether above the head. It is really immeasurable. The space is immeasurable. Oceans are limited compared to very space. It is really absolutely Nisima, absolutely endless. The ocean is not absolutely endless. It is relatively endless. But the space is Nisima, essentially. And when the yogi has this infacedness, antarmukhi, inwardliness and infacedness, when the yogi is indrawn, he experiences that he has this chidakasham. And perhaps you have heard of this term in mysticism. So in that heart, which is in this finite body, finite dimensions and measurable dimensions of body, is itself immeasurable. And then he understands that my being is like space, boundless, spotless, untouched. Nothing touches the space. Nothing touches the ether principle. So he understands that my very being is like this Akasha. It is luminous and it is also endless like Akasha. On one hand, it is luminous, which we just now saw in Vyasa's comment, earlier statement. So it is not only luminous, but it is endless, like really like space. That is why it has been referred to as Chidakasha, Akasha Samana. So that gives the touchstone effect. Or sometimes the luminosities of sun, moon, the stars, or some jewels. Jewels always have a brightness. So they also can give some, their prabha, their effulgence also can give such touchstone effect to our mind. The yogi experiences one's being in its essential, quintessential state. And that gives him asmita samapannavastha in samadhi psychology. The mind is engrossed in asmita tattvam. You should recall that we had considered the samprajnat asamprajnat samadhis. In samprajnata samadhi, we considered asmitanugata samprajnata samadhi. So this is aspita samapatti, aspita samapannavastha, aspita samadhi itself. And then how is the chitta there? So he beautifully explains with very apt predicates. Chittam nistarangam, a waveless, endless ocean. Mohodadhivat. It is Mohodadhivat means Sagaravat. That means like an ocean. Ocean how? Not as you see the ocean by going to a seashore, where there is constant movement of incoming, outgoing waves. But this is Nistarangam. No ruffling, no wave, no disturbance on that water, which is spreading up to the horizon and even beyond. So my being is such boundless, waveless, ananta, nisima. And he quotes Panchashikacharya, who describes Asmita in his treatise, in his text. So it is described to Anumatram. It is Anumatram, means it is like a particle, but in other dimension perspective of it, it is like ocean, endless space. And yogi, realizing that, he comes to know that this is how I am. I am not delimited by my class, caste, creed, gender, status, age, etc. Otherwise, if you are asked, who are you? You will say, either I am a man or I am a woman. I am of this race, I am of this family, this is my ancestry, this is my vangsha, this is my kulam, and this is my age, this is my condition, this is my gender, this is my etc. delimitations. But we are essentially not that. We are ageless. We are unborn. We are deathless. You should recall, we had discussed the metaphysical status of our being. And yogi realizes that, gets the experience of that self, which is birthless, deathless, decayless, conditionless, stateless, immutable, luminous, sorrowless. And yogi comes to know one's own self. And that is Asmita Matra Pravrutti. That is called Asmita Matra Pravrutti, as we have been considering various pravrittis. Vyasa describes that as Asmita Matra Pravrutti. Or it is also Jyotishmana Pravrutti. And by this, the yogi's mind becomes now immortal. And not mortal mind like our minds. We are all mortals, our mind is mortal. It is prone to all oscillations, whereas now the yogi's mind is not the mortal mind, and therefore it gets qualified to go into Ekatatvabhyasa, to be getting totally submerged in Dhyanabhyasa, Samadhi sadhana, and that's how it is. A chitta parikarma, no antaraya will touch, and therefore the yogi will be invariably in samadhi state. So this is what is the description that Vyasa has offered with respect to Asmita Matra Pravrutti. And it is Jyotishmana Pravrutti, it is Vishoka Pravrutti. So we try to get some introductory and very fundamental description of the Chitta Parikarma Upaya, the fourth measure. There is something still to be looked into, but that we will do in our next session. Enough for the time being. Namaskar, all of you.